In the news today, food banks, they've been dubbed the people who use them, the hidden hungry, because Charlotte was just highlighting this earlier, that people are forced to line up at these food banks and feed themselves and feed their family, and the figure they reckon is around, what, 500,000?
Yeah, 500,000 people, so
500,000
now are relying on them.
Yeah, and this is a new report by Oxfam doing this. This is the austerity food blogger Jack Monroe, who knows what it's like to survive in the bare minimum. Before we go anywhere, Jack, I had a woman called Steve in yesterday, and you wouldn't believe how many people get into trouble. You made a mistake. You so made a mistake. That woman's name's not Steve, but that woman's name was Steve, and this woman's name is Jack. That's how she likes to be known. Surviving on the bare minimum. A lot of people will say they don't believe these figures. Who's using this? I mean, you've been there, you've seen it, you've done it. Tell us all.
I've been using a food bank myself for about the past 6 months, since I was unemployed. When I was unemployed, I was referred to my local food bank by a childcare provider. I used to go to a nursery group with my son, and one of the women that ran it referred me to a food bank. She noticed I was losing a lot of weight. They put a free lunch on a Wednesday. I think the women that ran the group noticed that me and my son always had seconds and thirds of the free lunch, and she asked me if everything was okay, and quite clearly it wasn't. But I'm now in full-time employment, and that's quite typical. A lot of the people that I see at my local food bank go along in their work uniforms, and they're turning up before or after their shifts to feed themselves, and it's the figure quoted by Oxfam this morning, 62% of people that rely on food banks are from a family where at least one parent works.
Right, really scary. And you know, Jack, just tell me how scary it is. You know, we can all say, oh, I haven't got money to do this or that, or buy a new tie, or, you know, wash the car, or whatever it happens to be. But to actually say, I have not got enough money to buy food, how scary is that?
It's terrifying, because you say about a tie and a car. I don't have a car, I don't have a TV, I haven't turned my heating on since last November. So to strip back on all the essentials and then still not have any money for food is, especially when you've got a child to look after, is absolutely petrifying. You scrabble together what you can to feed your child, and if there's anything else left over, you eat it yourself. But then there's always that guilt, because if you make a big batch of value pasta with value chopped tomatoes on top and put it in the fridge, and if you eat some of that yourself, then that's a meal that your child's not going to have.
You know, I'm glad you highlighted that, because we have a number of people who would say, look, you can eat for £10 a week if you buy fresh produce, if you grow your own, whatever. You've talked us through the realities of that. What about how it feels, or how humiliating it must be, just from a pride point of view? It must be embarrassing to basically beg for food when you're not having to beg. Are they good at not making you feel that you're begging for this?
There shouldn't be a stigma attached to using food banks, and the volunteers at food banks and the people that organise them do go out of their way to make sure that that you feel as comfortable as possible. But in my shoes, I had a £27,000 a year job, and I could look after myself, I could look after my son, I had a nice flat, I had the basics, I was all right. And to go from that to standing outside a community centre in a queue of 100 people waiting 40 minutes to be given 5 items of food in a carrier bag, it's an unthinkable contrast.
Yeah.
It's interesting, we've been getting reaction in this morning, and actually there is a fair amount of scepticism about people that use food banks. A lot of people are saying, like there's one here from N. Davis saying, a lot of people who use food bank, they always seem to have a packet of cigarettes, they always seem to have, some cans of lager in their fridge. So there is this feeling that, people are spending their money on other things. So if you had a message for, for those people who are getting in touch saying, actually, are they spending money on things they shouldn't be, and that's why they haven't got money for food, what would you say?
I would say to go and stand outside your local food bank for half an hour and observe the people in their work uniforms that are turning up, to observe the realities of the people that use food banks. You're always going to get the commenters that people on benefits have got huge televisions, or they should go and get a job, and that's to me, frankly, ridiculous. It tars a lot of people with one big ugly brush, and I think the people that made those comments don't know anything about people that use food banks. I say, like myself, people wouldn't look at me and think that I'm poor, but what does a poor person look like?
And what effect are welfare reforms, if any, having on all of this? I mean, you're out there, you're blogging. What sort of feedback and reaction are you getting to this? Do you think what's happening in welfare will add to this situation?
I can speak from a local perspective, and I know that my local food bank has had to double its opening hours over the past couple of weeks in order to deal with the increase in demand for the amount of people now using food banks. And the increase in people using food banks came with the welfare reforms, with the bedroom tax. A lot of the people that I speak to have seen benefit sanctions, have been hit by the spare room subsidy, etc. So for the government to say there's no correlation between the number of people using food banks and the welfare reforms is spurious and ridiculous.
And Jack, where do these food banks get their food from?
The one that I use gets donations from members of the public, local churches, and a couple of local supermarkets are on board. But I mean, I would ask any local supermarket to say that if they've got any waste products that they throw out at the end of the day, to think maybe where that can go, because it's not going to make them any profit, but it could do so much good if they just donated it to a local food bank.
It's a serious situation, it's a scary situation. 500,000 people find themselves in the situation that you found yourself in. Thank you very much indeed for talking to us about it. Thank you very much. Here's Matt with the sports news.
Yes, indeed. Our top sports story this morning, Mark Hughes is the new manager of Stoke City.